The morning my wife was buried, her attorney called me and said, "Walter, there's something you need to see before you go home. Don't let your daughter-in-law inside that house tonight. She knows where the safe is." I had known Roy Callahan for 30 years. He was a man who chose his words the way a surgeon chooses a scalpel, never one more than necessary. So when he said those 12 words, I didn't ask questions. I just stood there in the parking lot of First Presbyterian Church in Bozeman, Montana, with a handful of carnations I hadn't put down yet, and I felt the grief in my chest shift into something colder and harder. But before I tell you what Roy showed me in that office, you need to understand what kind of day it had already been. You need to understand that my son's wife had not cried once during the entire service. Not once. My name is Walter Greer. I am 67 years old. I spent 22 years as a structural engineer for the Army Corps of Engineers before I retired to run the family property in Gallatin County, 68 acres of high pasture, a creek that ran cold even in August, and a farmhouse my grandfather built by hand in 1941. I am not a soft man. I did not get soft when my knees started going, or when the arthritis settled in my left hand. My wife Margaret used to say I was the only man she knew who got quieter the angrier he became. She said it like it was a warning. She had a lot of quiet warnings about people. I should have listened more carefully. Margaret was a woman of extraordinary discipline. She had grown up poor in Billings, the daughter of a grain elevator worker, and she carried that upbringing like armor. Invisible but always there, she taught elementary school for 18 years, managed our books with a precision that would shame most CPAs, and in the last decade of her working life, she had become a licensed financial planner, seeing clients out of a small office on Main Street. She was not flashy. She wore the same pearl earrings to church every Sunday and drove a 12-year-old Subaru she refused to replace because it still ran fine. She was also, as I discovered the morning of her funeral, considerably wealthier than I had known. Our son Derek was 38. He had my height and his mother's dark eyes, but somewhere along the way he had developed neither her discipline nor my patience. He was a likable man in the way that certain dogs are likable, enthusiastic, affectionate, and entirely capable of destroying your furniture while you were out. He had changed jobs 9 times in 15 years. He had borrowed money from us 7 times that I knew of, his wife Cassandra, and I am going to say exactly what I thought of her, because this is my story. Cassandra was the kind of woman who wore expensive jewelry to a funeral in rural Montana and somehow made you feel underdressed for not doing the same. They arrived at the church 40 minutes late, not because of traffic. Bozeman doesn't have traffic at 10 in the morning. They arrived late because Cassandra had apparently decided her original outfit wasn't appropriate and needed to change, a decision that required Derek's full logistical support for reasons I never understood. They slid into the pew behind me during the second hymn. I heard Cassandra's perfume before I heard her heels. She did not touch my shoulder. She did not lean forward and say a word to me. She sat behind me as though she were attending a mildly inconvenient event on a busy Saturday. During the reception afterward, held in the church hall by women from Margaret's Sunday school class, who had made our favorite lemon bars and chicken salad on croissants, I watched my daughter-in-law from across the room. She stood near the window holding a small plate and looking at her phone. I watched her tap something out, then show the screen to Derek. He nodded once, very slightly, then glanced in my direction. I have spent 35 years reading structural load assessments. I know when something is about to give way. Derek came to me just as the last of the neighbors were leaving. He hugged me, which he had not done when he arrived, and the hug lasted exactly long enough to feel like a transaction. He stepped back and kept his hands on my shoulders. "Dad," he said, "I just want you to know we're here for you, whatever you need." "Thank you, son," I said. "We were thinking," he said, "since the house is so big now and you're going to be alone, we thought maybe we could come stay for a few weeks. Help you sort through Mom's things. Help you figure out the finances." Cassandra appeared at his elbow. "We just want to make sure everything is organized properly," she said. "Margaret handled so much. You shouldn't have to navigate all of it alone, especially the estate paperwork." She said estate the way some people say jackpot. "I'll manage," I said. "Dad," Derek said, lowering his voice, "we know Mom had accounts. We know she had the practice. There are things that need to be filed quickly, within 30 days of death, or the state gets involved. We've been reading up on it. We just want to help you protect what's yours. What's yours? Not what's ours, not what's the family's, yours. I looked at my son. I thought about the boy who used to fall asleep in the truck on the way back from fishing. I thought about the man who had called me in December, 6 months ago, asking for $40,000 to cover a business debt he couldn't explain clearly. The same man Margaret had quietly refused. The same man who had not spoken to his mother for 8 weeks after that refusal. My phone buzzed. I stepped away to answer it. Roy Callahan's voice was clipped and careful. He told me to come to his office before I went home. He told me not to let Cassandra into the house that evening. I told Derek I needed to stop by the funeral home to settle the final billing. It was a lie, and I said it without guilt. I drove my truck 6 blocks to Roy's office on Lamb Street, parked in the alley, and went in through the back entrance because Roy had specifically asked me to. He was waiting at his desk with a banker's box, an expression I had never seen on his face before. Roy was a man who had handled divorces, wrongful deaths, and 2 separate disputes over mineral rights. He was not easily disturbed. He looked disturbed. "Sit down, Walter," he said. What he showed me over the next 90 minutes rearranged everything I thought I knew about my wife, my son, and the last 3 years of my marriage. Margaret had come to Roy 14 months ago. She had asked him to help her set up a revocable living trust without telling me, not because she was hiding it from me in malice. Roy was careful to say that, but because she was protecting me. She had discovered, during a routine review of her financial planning software, that someone had been making small, irregular withdrawals from a joint savings account she and I rarely touched. The kind of account you don't check, because it's the kind of account you opened 20 years ago for emergencies and then forgot about. The withdrawals had started small, $60 here, $120 there. Over 18 months, they added up to nearly $23,000. The signature on file matched Derek's because Derek was a joint signatory, added during a period 8 years ago when he had been responsible with money and we had trusted him with access in case of our emergency. Margaret had confronted him. He had denied it, then admitted it, then wept, then blamed Cassandra's credit card debt, then promised to repay it, then stopped returning her calls. She had not told me because she knew what I would do. She knew I would end the relationship on the spot, and she had not been ready to do that to our family. She loved Derek in the way that mothers love their children, which is a particular kind of love that forgives things it should not forgive and carries the weight of that forgiveness in silence. But she had also taken steps. She had moved her personal assets, the investment accounts built from 15 years of commission income, a small inheritance from her own mother that she had never spent, and the proceeds from selling a rental property we had owned jointly, but that had been deeded to her alone, into the trust. The total value, Roy told me quietly, was a little over $1.4 million. I did not speak for a long time after he said that. Roy continued. Margaret had also, in the weeks before she died, she had been diagnosed with a fast-moving pancreatic cancer in October and given 4 to 6 months, which she had not told me about until February, 3 weeks before the end, hired a private investigator named Dennis Farrow out of Missoula. She had hired him to document what she suspected was more than financial theft. Roy slid a manila envelope across the desk. The photographs inside were taken with a telephoto lens. The first several showed Derek and Cassandra meeting with a man I didn't recognize in the parking lot of a strip mall in Livingston. Roy told me the man was a paralegal who had been disbarred in Idaho for filing fraudulent power of attorney documents. The last photograph showed Cassandra standing at the front door of my house. The timestamp read 11:14 in the morning, 8 days ago, a Wednesday. Margaret had still been alive on that Wednesday. She had been in hospice care at our house, confined to the hospital bed set up in the living room. I had run to the hardware store that morning. I had been gone for 40 minutes. As did Roy. She let herself in with a key, he said. Dennis documented it. He was watching the property because Margaret asked him to. Cassandra was inside for 22 minutes. I thought about the small fireproof lockbox Margaret kept in her closet. I thought about whether it was still there. I thought about the fact that I had not checked it, because I had been too busy sitting with my dying wife to think about anything else. Roy told me what I needed to do. He told me to go home, to play the grieving and overwhelmed widower, I very nearly was anyway, and to let Derek and Cassandra believe they had the upper hand. He told me that Dennis Farrow had documentation that would matter more if given time to fully develop, that there were indications Cassandra had recently approached a real estate agent about the Greer property and had represented herself, in that conversation, as having power of attorney over my affairs. She did not have power of attorney over my affairs. No such document existed. But she was apparently under the impression that one could be created. I drove back to my house. The driveway was already full. Derek's rented SUV was parked crooked across the gravel. When I went inside, Cassandra was in the kitchen making coffee as though she lived there. She had already moved a stack of Margaret's cookbooks off the counter and set them on the floor to make room for her own bag. We went ahead and settled in, Derek said from the hallway. He was looking at his phone. Hope that's okay. We put our bags in the guest room. I nodded slowly. I let my face go slack. I moved like a man whose bones hurt, which they did. Of course, I said, glad to have the company. Cassandra turned from the coffee maker with a smile that was warm in the way that gas station sushi is technically food. We're going to take such good care of you, Walter, she said. You just rest. You've been through so much. That night, I lay in bed and listened to them. The house was old and the walls were thin, and my hearing was better than either of them knew. I heard Cassandra on the phone in the guest bathroom with the fan running, which muffles voices for people who don't know that the vent from that bathroom connects directly to the ceiling of the master bedroom. She was talking to someone about a timeline. She used the phrase, before he has a chance to lawyer up. And she used the phrase, the land alone is worth 800. And she said Derek's name twice in a tone of voice that contained no affection whatsoever. I thought about my wife in that hospice bed, watching me leave for 40 minutes, knowing what might be coming through that door while I was gone. I thought about the courage it took to die without burdening me with the full weight of what she knew. I thought about the letter Roy had given me in a sealed envelope, which I had not yet opened, which Margaret had written and left with him for this specific purpose. I opened it. Her handwriting was looser than usual. The pen had caught and dragged in places, the way it does when your hand is not cooperating with your intentions. She wrote, Walter, if you're reading this, I'm gone and the wolves are in the house. I know you. I know you want to go straight at it. Don't. I have left you everything you need to finish this the right way. Roy has the trust documents. Dennis has the photographs. The lockbox in the closet has been moved. It is now under the loose board in the mudroom, behind the boot rack. The combination is our wedding date, month and day and year. Everything you find there belongs to you. Every word I wrote belongs to you. Use it. Don't let them make you feel like a foolish old man. You were never foolish. You were just too decent to see it coming. I love you. I loved you every day. Finish this. I folded the letter and put it in my shirt pocket against my chest. 3 days passed. I played my part. I moved slowly and said little. I let Cassandra guide me to chairs and refresh my coffee and explain, patiently and with great condescension, that the estate process could be complicated and that they really ought to bring in their own financial advisor to help navigate everything alongside Roy. I let Derek find the empty safe in the bedroom closet. I had moved the lockbox to the mudroom as Margaret had instructed, and the closet safe had contained nothing of value for years, and I watched his face go carefully neutral when he found it empty. Did Mom have another safe? He asked me at dinner. Cassandra was watching me from across the table. I don't think so, I said. I looked confused. I was good at looking confused. That night, I retrieved the lockbox from the mudroom. Inside was a USB drive, 3 years of bank statements with transactions highlighted in yellow, a handwritten ledger in Margaret's precise columns, and a letter addressed to the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office. The letter detailed, with dates and amounts and account numbers, $31,000 in unauthorized withdrawals over 2 years. It named Derek as the signatory. It noted the pattern. It was signed by Margaret Greer, notarized, and dated 6 weeks before she died. Underneath all of it was a small digital recorder. Margaret had pressed the record button on it on the Wednesday that Cassandra had come into the house. It had been sitting on the closet shelf, powered on, inside an empty shoebox. 22 minutes of audio. Cassandra moving through the bedroom. Cassandra's voice, speaking to someone on the phone while standing in my wife's room in my wife's house, while my wife was dying in the room below. Cassandra's voice said, "The safe's in the master closet. I saw it when I was here in January. I don't know the combination, but Derek thinks he can get the old man to open it voluntarily if we play it right. The trust is the problem. Roy Callahan has something, but we don't know what. We need to get Walter to sign the POA before Callahan gets to him. Once we have the POA, the property is ours to manage." She paused, listening. "He's not going to fight it," she said. "He's 67 and he just lost his wife. He's not going to fight anything." I sat in the mudroom for a long time after I heard that. She was wrong about one thing. Roy had advised me to wait one more day. The Gallatin County Sheriff's Office had a financial crimes investigator named Patricia Harlow who had been briefed by Dennis Farrow. She needed 24 hours to coordinate with the county attorney's office and confirm the fraudulent POA filing. Cassandra had, in fact, submitted a power of attorney document to a title company in Livingston, bearing my forged signature attached to a preliminary inquiry about the property. That was not a civil matter. That was a felony. On the fourth morning, I came downstairs to find Cassandra at the kitchen table with a document in front of her and a pen set beside it like a place setting. "Walter," she said, her voice all warmth and patience, "we found something in Mom's files that needs your signature. It's just a routine estate filing. Roy was supposed to handle it, but there's a deadline today, and we didn't want to bother him." Derek stood near the back door with his arms crossed, not looking at me. I sat down. I looked at the document. It was a power of attorney form. It was not blank. It had been partially filled in, and my name was already printed in the relevant field. "I just need your signature on the bottom line," Cassandra said. "It's standard procedure." I picked up the pen. I turned the document over. On the back, I wrote, "I know what you filed in Livingston." I pushed it back across the table. Cassandra stared at it. Derek looked up from the door. Then I set the pen down, stood up, and said, "Roy Callahan will be here in 20 minutes. I'd suggest you both sit down." What followed was not dramatic in the way movies make things dramatic. Roy arrived with Patricia Harlow and a deputy. The conversation was brief. Cassandra said very little. Derek said too much. He began, in the deputy's presence, to explain that the withdrawals had been a misunderstanding, that Margaret had known about them, that it was a family loan arrangement, that I was confused about the timeline. Every sentence he spoke in that kitchen, in the presence of law enforcement, dug the hole deeper. Cassandra was arrested that morning on the forged document charge. Derek was not arrested that day, but the financial investigation that followed the arrest was thorough, and the Gallatin County Attorney's Office took the position that $31,000 withdrawn from an account without the primary holder's consent was not a family loan arrangement. I did not watch them put handcuffs on Cassandra. I went and stood on the back porch and looked at the pasture and the creek, which was running clear because we'd had a wet spring. The trial lasted 4 days. Cassandra pleaded down to 2 felony counts in exchange for cooperation. Derek entered a separate guilty plea on the financial fraud charge and received a suspended sentence with full restitution ordered, the full $31,000 to be repaid to the estate with interest over 5 years. I did not attend either proceeding. Roy attended on my behalf and called me each evening with a summary. Margaret's trust passed to me without contest. Roy filed the paperwork the week after the trial concluded. The financial planning practice had been wound down during her illness, but the investment accounts were intact, managed by a firm in Denver she had trusted for years. I spoke with the firm's advisor on a Thursday morning, and she walked me through the portfolio the same way Margaret would have, patiently and without condescension. $1.4 million, built over 20 years of early mornings and client meetings and compound interest, and a woman who drove a 12-year-old Subaru because it still ran fine. I sold the Subaru to a young woman who taught at the same elementary school where Margaret had worked. I sold it for $2,000 and included a note in the glove box that said the car had belonged to a good woman and deserved to go to another one. The young woman emailed me 2 weeks later to say she had found the note and cried in the parking lot. I kept the house. I thought I wouldn't be able to, but I could. I repainted the kitchen, which I had been putting off for 4 years. I had the mudroom floor properly fixed. I'd been meaning to address that loose board for longer than I could remember. I had the Crete bank reinforced on the eastern side where it had been eroding since 2019. I did not speak to Darrett for 7 months. When he finally called, he did not open with an apology. He opened with a question about whether I had updated my will. I hung up. He called again 3 weeks later. That time, he said he was sorry. He said it haltingly, in pieces, the way a man says something he has rehearsed but still isn't sure about. I listened to the whole thing. When he finished, I told him that I believed he meant it, and that meaning it was a start, and that it was going to take a long time, and that I wasn't going to pretend otherwise to make either of us feel better. He said he understood. I said I would call him at Christmas. I did call him at Christmas. It was a short conversation. It was honest. That was enough for now. In March, I drove to Livingston to see Dennis Farrow. I brought him a bottle of Blanton's bourbon, which Roy had told me was his preference, and I shook his hand for a long time in the parking lot outside his office. He said my wife had been the clearest-headed client he had ever worked for, and that she had known exactly what she was doing and why, and that she had not been afraid. He said she had been more concerned about me than about herself. That sounded right. That sounded exactly like her. In the spring, I did something I had been thinking about since the morning I sat in Roy's office with that manila envelope. I established the Margaret Greer Financial Safety Fund, administered through a nonprofit in partnership with the Montana Elder Justice Coalition. The fund provides free legal consultations and financial forensic review for seniors who suspect they are being financially exploited by family members. Roy sits on the advisory board. Patricia Harlow, the financial crimes investigator, helped us design the intake process. The first year, we helped 19 families, recovered assets in 11 cases, referred 4 cases to law enforcement, kept 3 families out of court through mediation. Every time we open a new case, I think about a woman who drove a 12-year-old car and wore the same pearl earrings to church every Sunday and spent the last months of her life making sure that when the wolves came, they would find that the house was not as unguarded as it looked. I think about what she wrote at the end of that letter. You were never foolish. You were just too decent to see it coming. I am still too decent, probably. I don't know that I would change that. But I see things more clearly now. I see them the way she saw them, with patience and precision, noting the small inconsistencies, reading the weight of what isn't said. She taught me that, even after she was gone. That's the thing about marrying the right person. They keep teaching you. I keep thinking about that locked box under the mudroom floor. Margaret knew her knees were bad. She knew getting down to pull up that board wasn't easy for her anymore. She did it anyway, in the last weeks of her life, because she understood something I had been too comfortable to see. That love without clear eyes isn't really protection. It's just hope dressed up as a plan. For a long time, I blamed myself for not seeing Derek clearly. I kept replaying the years, looking for the moment I missed it. But I don't think there was one clean moment. It was gradual, the way a foundation shifts. A small crack here, another there, and if you don't know what you're looking at, you tell yourself it's settling. That's what I did. I called it settling. What Margaret had that I lacked in those final months was the willingness to look directly at the thing she most didn't want to see, and then do something about it instead of hoping it would change. That is a particular kind of courage that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't look like bravery from the outside. It looks like a woman organizing her files on a Tuesday afternoon. It looks like an appointment with an attorney. It looks like a digital recorder in a shoebox on a closet shelf. The people who protect the ones they love most aren't always the loudest ones in the room. Sometimes they're the ones sitting quietly, paying attention, writing things down. I spent 67 years thinking that being a decent man was the same as being a prepared one. It isn't. Decency without discernment leaves doors open that should be locked. I was decent the whole time Cassandra was in my wife's room. I was decent while Derek was emptying an account I hadn't looked at in 2 years. Decency is not enough on its own. You have to pair it with the willingness to think clearly about what is actually happening, not what you wish were happening. The foundation we built in Margaret's name has handled 43 cases now. I meet with the families sometimes when they want to talk. What I see, over and over, is not stupidity. These are not foolish people. They are decent people who trusted the people they raised, the people they loved, and who confuse that trust with evidence. The hardest thing I tell them is this: the moment you suspect something is wrong, you don't have to act on it immediately, but you cannot afford to look away. Looking away is a choice. It just doesn't feel like one at the time. Derek and I are still finding our way back to each other. It is slow. I don't rush it. He is working on himself in ways that I can see when we talk, and I respect the effort, even when the conversation is uncomfortable. I didn't raise a monster. I raised a man who made choices that hurt people, and who is now living with those consequences. That is its own kind of hard, and I don't pretend otherwise. Margaret left me a letter and a locked box and a foundation to build. She left me a reason to get up in the morning when grief made the house feel too large. That's not a small thing. Most people spend their whole lives trying to leave something behind that matters. She figured out how to do it even while she was dying. I'm still learning from her. I expect I will be for the rest of my life.